What do you want me to say about Super Mario 64 that hasn't been said already? Do you want me to call it impressive for the time? Or maybe talk about how it casually changed the landscape of gaming as we know it forever? Or should I mention the primitive camera and the blocky graphics, but how it's all forgivable given just what it is?
Well, you see, I plan to do just that anyway.
Look, Super Mario 64 is a game that everyone and their grandma has reviewed. Literally. Grandmothers are putting down the damn cookies and their knitting and making video essays about Super Mario 64. World leaders reference it in their speeches and how it influences their decisions on a day-to-day basis. This game has changed the lives of millions of people, and only one of the prior 3 sentences are true.
As of today, we are 50 episodes into the JeffCompass web series, something I'm super proud of and excited for. So to celebrate that, we're gonna start a 3D Mario retrospective, starting with none other than Super Mario 64. The reason I waited so long to do it was because it's kind of a generic series to do. I won't even lie about that. So I kind of wanted to let the dust settle a little bit. We'll review some Pikmin, we'll review some Pac-Man, but now, time for the big boys. We're reviewing Super Mario.
Super Mario 64 is ultimately a culmination of video games as a whole up to this point. The year was 1996, but even a year before that was a completely different world in gaming. Of course, being comprised of side-scrollers and games you would only call a true 3D experience if you were drunk off a NyQuil. I mean, really imagine all the way back for a second. We went from table tennis electronic screens to arcade games to bare-bones side-scrollers to side-scrollers that were masterpieces to this day. I guess the industry could have just become complacent at that point. They could have said, all right, we found our groove, pack it up, we're making 2D Mario and top-down adventure games forever. But Nintendo was, and always has been, the company who would say, among all that, what's next? Doing just that presents a phenomenal risk. When a company upends almost 2 decades worth of achievements to start with essentially a fresh slate, they might make something that's bad. But you know Nintendo, it's all swings and not misses with them. Super Mario 64 was bound to be perfect. Except that's not true. The Virtual Boy came out just a year before this and it was a monumental disaster. Yeah, okay, however you want to word it, Super Mario 64 was a risk. I always feel like that this drive to take risks and change the world of gaming was a main component that separated Nintendo from Sega. But JeffCompass, Sega released the 32X and the Sega Saturn before the N64.
They sure did, but these were created more so in mind with the idea of bettering and improving 2D gaming and also making dating sims. The Sega Saturn, it had a lot of those.
Nintendo is the adult in the room in the gaming industry, and honestly always will be. It's telling that to this day, the remaining competitors, Microsoft and Sony, have been making essentially the same consoles their entire careers, just better. Super Mario 64 was an example at a time in the industry where there was still serious innovation happening. To many people, this game is the best video game ever created.
Because that statement never ages poorly.
The concept that a video game will be the best game ever made is something that's almost always proven to be wrong time and time again. I remember playing GTA 4 as a kid. Yes, I know I'm probably going to hell or whatever, but I remember genuinely feeling like a video game could not be better than that. It was just so realistic. And then you look back at it and go, oh, is that a human being or a freaking fish? I may not have been alive when Super Mario 64 was released, being born in 1999, but from what I've read and studied, there was a similar reaction to this game at the time. So the question today is not whether or not this game is good. We know it's good. I don't think there's any questioning that unless you're a clickbait YouTuber. But is Super Mario 64 a perfect game? Does it deserve to be called one of the best games of all time? And are there even flaws?
Did someone say talking negative about games? I'm good at that.
For one, I would say the camera is dysfunctional and not all that intuitive. The graphics are debatably gross now, especially if not played on a Nintendo 64, which did an efficient job disguising that. But okay, to be fair, you have to remember at a certain point in time, these flaws were essentially non-existent. There was little comparison. Just what were people even going to compare it to? It was the equivalent of TVs being invented back in the 1940s or something like that. As I've been saying, Super Mario 64 catapulted the video game industry to where we are today and simply cannot and will not be forgotten. The pipeline was transformative. We went from Super Mario 64 to action adventure games to shooters that have become all too commonplace.
So today, we're gonna answer the question, is Super Mario 64 the best game of all time? So bust out your N64s, or your Wii, or your Wii U, or your PC. There's a lot of ways to play this game.
Booting up the game, Princess Toadstool writes us a letter saying there's cake in the castle. Mario takes this as a hint that she's home alone and appears within 2 seconds, coming out of a warp pipe. Now, an important question to ask here, where the hell does this warp pipe even come from, and how does that even work? Like, is there an invisible sewer or something covered by dirt? Is it some sort of like crazy Looney Tunes trap? We never see it the rest of the game. And the rest of the goddamn world is completely closed off. But yeah, you know it. Princess Peach got kidnapped, so Mario goes home and the game ends. Oh, okay, I'm joking. But as you probably know, the goal of the game is to collect power stars to beat Bowser and rescue Princess Peach, and also the sky is blue. Super Mario 64 essentially hosts a pool of various star types that remain consistent throughout its 15 worlds. But it's not lacking in variety by any stretch of the imagination either. The first star of the game takes us to our first of many boss fight stars. I've always praised Nintendo games for the subtle game design approach, because you may not realize it, but this first star is designed exclusively to teach you how to play the game. It's basically a tutorial in disguise. You learn to move, you jump, and you throw, all in what feels like a pretty long trek, and this provides the player a pretty solid idea of what lies in store for the adventure ahead. But your journey might not revolve around just getting to King Babam though. What makes Super Mario 64 so interesting and player dependent is that, save for a few stars, you are able to do whatever you want in any given level. For instance, on your journey to the top of Babam Battlefield, you may notice red coins pretty much right away. And look, shiny, fun, collectible objects are about a convincing distraction as any to just give up on what you're doing. I just hope I don't see that while I'm driving, because there will be an accident. Perhaps you mess around with his chain chomp, or realize you can actually get the star behind his fence, or maybe you explore this other section of the world that's not even required to visit and passively end up collecting 100 coins. And that's because Super Mario 64 is very good at providing the illusion of freedom without actually providing it. The deal is, you may be able to get whatever stars in whatever order you want, but you aren't really able to multitask. This would be a fairly consistent issue with Mario until probably 2017, quite literally. Upon getting the star, the world boots you out, and you have to re-enter and backtrack. On this topic, one issue I often have with Mario 64 is not knowing just what a star's title is telling you to do. Like, blast away the wall in Thwomp's Fortress. Now, how the hell would someone know this means to get into a cannon and hit this specific corner of a wall? It's not like the wall has a crack in it or some sort of visual distinguishing it as breakable, like in Zelda. Not to mention the fact that this whole level is a goddamn fortress, which means, you know, just about everything is a wall. You're a wall. Or the classic wall kicks will work level in Cool Cool Mountain. Yeah, I know it's a classic, so I'm sorry, but how the hell would you know to jump off the stage here and find this whole hidden area? I'm a gamer, I'm not a psychiatrist. There are at least a few differences there. Ultimately though, the experience Super Mario 64 sets out to craft is one shrouded by secrets and exploration. When push comes to shove, this is probably a net positive in this game. The worlds are never big enough where you genuinely would never be able to figure out what to do with some trial and error, as if the world is a literal playground. These require Mario to run around the level and interact with the environment until numbers pop up in the sky. As one does. Whatever the case may be, I don't feel like Mario 64 is ever downright unfair or cryptic, but there's always a few exceptions to that rule. The Princess's Secret Slide is one of the most classic and memorable gaming secrets, perhaps ever, because otherwise, why the hell does this room even exist? Someone actually tell me why. I mean, I guess Peach is just a narcissist, having 3 paintings facing each other in the smallest room known to humanity. I mean, this is like a New York apartment or something. But of course, you jump in one of them and you get taken to a secret slide and get a star for your troubles. This star is of course a classic, but to get a second star here, you have to jump back in and beat it in less than 20 seconds. Now my issue with this is, let's say you do think to yourself, okay, let me try this again. Well, what if you get 20 seconds and 1 frame after that? Well, you might think the star is not there. You may never find that star. And statistically speaking, there's probably one person who just learned this star exists, and I feel for you, brother. I'm starting a therapy club for that. Or what about the red coins in the vanish cap under the moat stage, which can be found after draining Princess Peach's castle? There's no real way to view the red coins on the way down, meaning that you're essentially guaranteed to miss one at some point and have to do the level over, which just feels like serious padding to me. Now, I only mention all of this to talk about the experience Super Mario 64 creates for the player, whether intentional or not. Discovery up to this point had actually been a recurring theme in the Mario franchise, whether it was the pipe skips in the first Super Mario Brothers, or crouching on a white block in Super Mario Brothers 3, because I'm sure a lot of people figured that one out naturally. I didn't. written. This is clearly the developer's attempt to keep that sense of wonder, haha yes, wonder, haha, alive and thriving in the series as a recurring motif of the franchise. As much as I've critiqued some of the game design decisions up to this point, Super Mario 64 feels the most balanced to me in terms of difficulty and discovery in the entire series history, and probably even to this day. It's not like the successor, Super Mario Sunshine, which is at times cruelly cryptic, but it's also not like Super Mario Galaxy, which introduced linearity and begged to hold the player's hand at some points. The cold truth about Super Mario 64 is that, yes, sometimes this game is gonna be tough. There's gonna be times where it is a little bit confusing, but in a sense though, it makes this game feel genuine, and it helps the Mushroom Kingdom feel like an actual world rather than a video game.
Unfortunately, I'm a bit limited in the praise I can really provide Super Mario 64 in terms of immersion, and there's one reason for that. It was 1996.
Nowadays, people expect a lot out of their games, and platformers specifically. It almost feels like if a game isn't open world, there's gonna be someone who's complaining or upset. The reasons gamers root for this on average is the aforementioned immersion, and it's just better to have bigger products for most people. Super Mario 64 is structured in a way that disguises the limitations of the time pretty well. There are 15 worlds, but none of them intersect outright and are incredibly separate. These are all accessible through the hub world of Peach's Castle, where you can jump into a painting. Disclaimer, don't try that in real life. I specifically point out limitations here because it feels to me that the developers really wanted to make these levels bigger and have more stars, but were a bit too restricted in doing so, whether that be for the purposes of how they wanted to structure the game or just sheer technical limitations, which is kind of where I lean towards. To back up that claim, Snowman's Land and Cool Cool Mountain, for instance, really don't have anything that sets one apart from each other, and I personally struggle to see the need to separate these two if it wasn't for the aforementioned limitations. It feels to me they should have just been part of the same overarching world, as both are very much just, yup, this is a snow level, bust out the Christmas lights and eggnog, you motherfucker. I have similar sentiments towards Jolly Roger Bay and Dire Dire Docks as well. These limitations go beyond just the world pacing though. Now, whether it's a limitation or not, we have to talk about it again. My personal least favorite aspect of Super Mario 64 is the fact that once you collect a star, you're booted out of the level.
I think that's something about Super Mario 64 that divides the fan base to this very day. Was this aspect of grabbing stars and having to get booted out padding, or was it genuine? No, that's actually just padding. It's straight up padding. Like, you cannot convince me otherwise.
As said earlier, this hurts the idea that you could basically see and collect every star upon one entry, but at the same time, you can't. I feel like I see this labeled as a limitation quite a bit. Now, with this being my least favorite aspect of Super Mario 64, I do want to spend some time discussing it because I obviously have to back it up or people will not be happy. Now, let's speak in Nintendo's defense. First and foremost, Super Mario 64, as established, is essentially the first 3D game. Not just the first 3D Mario game, not just the first 3D Nintendo game, first 3D game. There weren't really precedents as we know them nowadays. There was no homework to cheat off of and pretend it was theirs. So that alone is a pretty overwhelming task. I mean, imagine making the first game of your genre. And I'm not just saying that as a throwaway line. Literally think about what that would be like. The past 10 or so years have been an entirely different mechanism of game design. One that's been perfected, sure, but one that you can basically take little to no inspiration from. You are essentially making the first video game. This is why Super Mario 64, in my opinion, ends up going in this direction at the end of the day, because Nintendo tried too hard to equate stars to levels. They almost didn't view it enough as a sandbox and thought, well, each star has to be something along the lines of going from point A to point B. The mindset was therefore not how can we go from point A to B to C to D, but how can we go from point A to point B 6 times in the same area. As a result, the question is not, did Nintendo have bad intentions by choosing to add padding? Is this just objectively padding? Personally, I'm inclined to say it is, just because it's a restriction that quite literally does not need to be there. And really think about it in more simple terms. It could be something like the blue coins later seen in the Sunshine, where it's just a counter, you know, or the moons in Mario Odyssey. Like, it's not a technical limitation to just have a counter and get objects. It's just not, okay? It's not. Now, it doesn't ruin the time that I have with this game or anything. Far from it. But there are moments where it pisses me off. Tall Mountain probably serving as the most prominent example, since this whole level is just a long climb, with stars being placed throughout the ascent that you have to do multiple times for no real reason. It makes each fall just feel like a slap to the face, too.
There is one exception to the rule, though. There is one type of star you can collect alongside others, and these are the 100 coin stars. I have a confession, and this will be a recurring confession throughout the 3D Mario retrospective. I really like 100 coin missions. I know it's probably a hot take. I know I'm weird, but like we're 50 episodes in. You already knew I was weird.
100 coin stars are, okay, look, I don't know how I could possibly explain that any further than the name. You get 100 coins. I know, it's crazy. The enjoyment of these can vary depending on what level you're doing them in. One that specifically pisses me off to oblivion is the 100 coin mission of Dire Docks. I have no clue what sort of drugs the developers took when making this level, but guess how many coins are available for this 100 coin mission? Your hint is that I just said the number one sentence ago, +6. Honest to God, I'm surprised to hear it's even that much, because when I was playing this, I barely scrounged together 100 of them. This level wouldn't be too bad if it wasn't for the line of coins that's super easy to miss at the start. Not just because of why the hell would this even be here, but unfortunately, this game has draw distance issues, meaning that you're kind of likely to miss that outright unless you have prior knowledge.
Now, this sort of thing's inevitable. I can't really blame them for having draw distance issues. Oh, but you know what I can blame them for? Not having more than 100 freaking coins in an entire level that spans like 2 worlds.
To get 100 coins, this game will also have blue coin switches that spawn blue coins that appear for a few seconds before disappearing. These are usually how you'll build up a majority of your 100 coins that you need to finish the level, but air caution, because there are some stars where if you miss any of them, your life will get a whole lot worse, like in Rainbow Ride, where I swear to God, I kept missing exactly 1 each time, which means either exiting the area and doing it again, or riding up the rainbow with 95 coins, praying you don't miss a jump. Oh, I missed a jump. I hate living. Still, on average, 100 coin stars are some of my favorite stars of the game, as these would at least prompt me to explore each and every corner of a level, because there's a lot to this game that you may not ever see otherwise. To be super optimal, you'll want to merge this with the game's many red coin missions, since a red coin will give you 2 coins a pop, and even if you're not going for the red coin star, you'll still want to pick them up for sure. Red coin missions are, again, one of my absolute favorite Super Mario 64 levels, and this game has a plethora of them. They're not all winners, some of them can be absolute bastards, but there's just something so satisfying in early 3D games with collecting objects, and clearly I wasn't alone in that sentiment, as every 3D game took this concept and took it too far. The red coins are also usually just pretty clustered together too, and I'd say they at least feel pretty intuitive, save for a few, which we'll talk about in a bit. One game design function Super Mario 64 focuses on quite a bit are the sub-levels. For example, in Lethal Lava Land, there'll be a volcano you can go into, or a dry desert having a pyramid in the center. These sub-levels are some of my favorite moments in Super Mario 64, and add so much depth and sheer joy to this game. They range in depth, of course. Something like Snowman's Land Igloo is clearly just a one-off little area for a star, where you can also get stuck and have to exit the entire area during a 100 coin mission, you know, if you're bad.
I got that footage from a friend. His name is JeffCompass.
And the developers got a decent amount of mileage from these areas as well, as the volcano has 2 stars, the pyramid has 4 if you count the fact that you have to collect the 100 coin there basically. And I already talked about the Princess's Slide area, but what would you do if I told you there were 2 other slide sub areas in this game?
We gotta revolt!
One of these is racing a giant penguin, which is one of the most memorable stars in the entirety of this game, and pretty challenging if you've never played the game before. I have a bone to pick though with the slide from Tall Tall Mountain. Firstly, to get there, you have to make the connection that this wall is something you can jump into. Now, who the hell is gonna know that? And then the actual star. My God, they have an outright jerk move right in the middle of the slide where you have maybe 1 second to react and go right. I mean, it's funny, don't get me wrong, and I don't expect every game to be PPBB easy, but damn, they at least have the decency to place you at the start of the slide when you re-enter, which I appreciate. But even when you know what to look out for, it's not uncommon to mess up the turn anyways, because it's very, very messy in terms of physics. Slides would continue to be a recurring level type throughout the franchise from here though, and it's funny because I don't think this gameplay is ever outright amazing, but every slide is just memorable nonetheless. Maybe it's because it taps into our childhood sense of wonder a bit, or maybe it's because they were lazy. Whatever fits the narrative of this video better. Throughout the early games, one of the most prominent Mario-isms were the power-ups. The obvious ones are missing here. The mushroom as we know it is gone, save for the one-ups, and there's no fire flowers and no stars. This is in favor of the cap system, which boasts 3 different power-ups. The first and most prominent, even being on the freaking box art, is the winged cap. So people have asked me over the years, where do I film these videos? Well, I actually filmed this in a top secret location in Alaska. There's FBI guards guarding this whole building. So no one look for me, okay, after I say this. There's no point.
but I don't like the wing cap.
I don't know, maybe it's just the way it's used in this game, but there are 2 levels that come to mind when I immediately remember about the wing cap. The first of which is the sub-level you unlock it at, which has a big old button calling back to the days of Super Mario World. The level immediately spawns you with the wing cap when you start, and from there, you're tasked with getting 8 red coins if you like to get the bonus star. The issue though is that if you lose enough altitude, it's basically over, and it's impossible to backtrack to get enough height, so you need essentially a perfect run. Now the good news is you don't lose a life at least if you die, with Mario just being respawned outside the castle, but it's not a particularly fun way to learn about this new mechanic and can be quite frustrating. But this one pales in comparison to how BS the second one of these missions is. Ugh, this one's near the finale of the game. Yeah, we're going upstairs. Not even just upstairs. Upstairs. There's 2 rooms, one of which contains crap and the other of which contains crap. Yeah, we'll get to it in a bit. But one of these 2 slices of fun is a weird little bonus star, another red coin mission taking place in the clouds. I don't inherently hate the idea of the gameplay. Basically, there's a ton of clouds and cannons, and using an infinite chain of wing caps, your task is to navigate these without falling. But if you do fall, you may not lose a 1-up, but like with the other mission, you respawn outside the castle. The issue here is that not only is this challenge lengthy, but getting back to it takes 3 minutes. I'd rather just lose a 1-up, as falling here is just the ultimate punishment. And this doesn't even account for my main issue. The wing cap controls are pretty damn clunky. Look, when they work, it's fun, especially considering it was 1996 and nothing else like it existed at the time. There is a genuine rush I get when I build up the right amount of speed, feeling like you're a true titan of the skies. I know I'm obligated to say some of that too, or the fanboys will hunt me down, but if you have to do anything precise with this thing, just forget it. There's no real way to be truly accurate. The issue is that is what every goddamn stage wants you to do with it, like this one wing cap stage in Bob on Battlefield, which is nearly impossible to do in one loop, especially when you factor in the draw distance. The other caps I don't feel all that great about, but they serve their place in Mario history and are still somewhat memorable. You have the metal cap, unlocked via a secret passage in the Hazy Maze Cave. This cap, as you can probably guess if you have, eyes, means you sink like a rock and are invincible. There's a few stars where getting to the bottom of the ocean with this is a requirement, but what pisses me off is you're locked the second you touch the water and have no room to move, making the window to collect these stars extraordinarily tight. The cap barely gets used in the game though, just like the invisible cap, which lets you move through thin barriers and some paintings, which I think has its biggest use in Boo Boo Mansion. That's not what it's called. Big Boo's Haunt. I called it Boo Boo Mansion. Like in Big Boo's Haunt. They feel like afterthoughts ultimately, but hey, Metal Mario would become a recurring character in the Mario franchise from here if you count him as a character. I didn't. I will say overall the controls in this game are pretty good. I'm gonna keep this section pretty short because I don't think I can really add much to this that hasn't already been said, but what Mario 64 does that I don't feel like even every 3D Mario game does is make the movement fun. There's a reason there's a legion of people speedrunning Super Mario 64 on the daily. Mario is snappy, and it feels like you genuinely become Mario. Like, he's fun to move around, punching, kicking, doing triple jumps. It is seriously addictive, and I honestly wish there were more stars in this game just because of that. So all in all, this game is mostly superb. There's so much positive that could be said. I mean, I could literally probably sit here for another hour and just talk about things I love about this game. One stage I specifically love is the Hazy Maze Cave. Not only is it unique to this game, it's just memorable. Now look, it's hellish and it's hard to navigate, but it's memorable. And I always had fun finding the stars here, except for this one. What the actual hell is this? I love Womp's Fortress. It's small, but it's packed and condensed and gives you a really cozy feeling. Or hell, Tiny Huge Island is genius. There's 2 paintings here. One takes you to a small world, one takes you to a big world. You use warp pipes to navigate between the 2, which leads to some downright genius interplay. And while this level may be frustrating at times, it's some of the best gameplay in the history of Mario. Not to mention, harkens back to one of the stages people loved most in Super Mario Bros. 3. Unfortunately, not all of these stages are clear winners. And keep in mind, I'm in Alaska or on Mars, but I unfortunately have to drop another hot take, and that the upstairs of Super Mario 64 should have just been cut from the game. I really disliked it. Let's start with TikTok Clock. For the record, I love the aesthetic, I love the idea, and I think it's extremely charming that you enter it with the clock to correlate with what speed you want the level to move at. Okay, with my contractually obligated praising out of the way, harkening back to the issue I had with Tall Tall Mountain, this is another level with stars that are placed among a vertical arena that you have to climb over and over and over again. If you make any missteps, especially with this crusty ass camera, you fall all the way down and it's over. And don't even get me started on the 100 coin mission. And yeah, this is another thing we're just gonna get out of the way. The camera in this game isn't all that great. It's something that was a monumental feat at the time, and again, it was the first of its kind. So I'm not gonna list this as a flaw with the game. I'm not gonna sit here beating it up for 20 years. It would feel like bullying, and I've never been mean to any game on this channel in my entire life. Yeah. Okay, again, contractually obligated to mention it in a Super Mario 64 video. We're moving on. Anyways, this stage just pisses me off, and any charm it has should just be saved for the fantastic Mario Kart track based off of it, because that's really the only thing I like that this brought to the franchise. And don't even get me started on Rainbow Ride, because I will get to it myself. Rainbow Ride is easily the worst Super Mario 64 has to offer, in my opinion. I mean, it's just unremarkably loathsome. This is basically the final level of the game, and it sure feels like it, because I guarantee you they made this in like 3 seconds. I don't even really have anything positive to say about this level. I'm sorry to the fans of this if there are any. I don't really know if there are. It just feels like a gross combination of test levels, and it goes against everything that a stage like Bob on Battlefield sets as is what you'd expect for this game. I can't help but feel that in this last stretch of the game developers totally missed their original vision for the product. Maybe they felt rushed or were running out of ideas, but I do feel like this being the last part of the game is sort of telling as to what the developers thought, because it's in no way a coincidence that these levels that feel like half-baked ideas are shoved into this final corridor. Each section, so to speak, of the game has Bowser doors blocked off by stars. The first Bowser door is a measly 8, second is 30, third is 50, and the final is 70. Each floor has its own unique Bowser level and fight, which to be honest are some of my favorite levels of the entire game. They're quite short and designed to be an obvious obstacle course, but the reason I forgive it in comparison to something like Rainbow Ride's linearity is because it's just a one and done, which makes it work in its favor instead of make me want to quit this YouTube channel. There are optional red coin stars in these levels as well, which are some of my favorites of the entire game. They just feel like a little extra challenge and add a lot of depth to these small levels, especially with the phenomenal Bowser music playing in the background. The Bowser fights themselves, though, just suck. I'm not sure how common of a take this is, but besides memorability, I hate these fights to the moon and back and to the moon and back again. You have to grab Bowser's tail, spin the control stick, and then throw him into balls with spikes on them. The issue is that I've never been able to find a correct rhythm or timing to launch him. It just feels delayed for one, which makes it feel basically out of my control whether or not I can win here. If you think this fight is good, you're either a speedrunner or you're wrong, and opinions are banned in the Mushroom Kingdom. Anyways, with how many levels this game introduces, you have more than enough luxury to choose whatever stars you need to get to your final total. I feel this is the most genius part of Super Mario 64, and why so many kids were drawn to this game. While I may go for 100% nowadays in my playthroughs, back in the day, it wasn't uncommon for me to have only gotten as low as 1 star in a stage, or perhaps bolster my star count with all the secret Princess Peach stars, which are given quite generously to the player by talking to Toads and Mips. Yeah, his name is Mips. I don't know what that means. I'm sure it stands for something, but he's Mips. But as a result, it's hard for me to even be overly critical while reviewing this game, as I've been saying. A lot of the flaws can be ignored or written off. The game isn't holding you ransom to do a star you don't like, unless there are truly 50 stars that make you miserable, and I don't know about that. I'd say there's only 49. This system is genius though, and I feel like it set up the future of 3D gaming in a lot of ways. Super Mario 64 is the first of its kind. Now, I feel like a big question we have to ask ourselves is, does that make its flaws a moot point? Does that mean when I ask, is this one of, if not the best game ever made, that we don't take these things into account? Take a look at the game's presentation, for example. Obviously, when we consider the graphics of a video game, most of us will say, well, it was good at the time, and my god, this game was. It may be a bit clunky nowadays, but it's still essentially perfect in my opinion, and textures like this wavy entrance or the Metal Mario still grab my attention to this day. But then he has something like the music, which I feel like isn't really a matter of was it good at the time, and something we can look at nearly objectively. The overworld theme, so to speak, is a literal classic classic and instantly recognizable and nostalgic for millions of people. And in my opinion, the Dire Dire Dock song is one of the best pieces of music ever written. The issue is, beyond that, there's not a lot that's left. You have this secret area type of music that ends up getting reused in like 10 levels, some lava and snow music, which is still good, and not much else. And the two songs I praised heavily get reused in spades throughout the game. To a degree, that's okay. These songs never get old. They're all phenomenal and classics, but I can't help but feel they sort of slacked a bit in this aspect. I feel like unique tracks for every stage would have helped quite a bit with differentiating the snow levels a bit, for example, or the grass levels, and even the water levels. And it kind of contributes to them feeling like they should have just been part of one bigger package. Just based on my speculation, my guesses for why there's very few music tracks in this game boils down to two theories. This game is on the N64 for one, which used cartridges, and that meant the space for music and video was probably sparse. And it's also probably just because Super Mario 64 was rushed out the door to meet a deadline because people would either have this or Pilot Wing 64 at launch, and I'm pretty sure people wanted to play this instead. The lack of music variety, though, is a flaw that I barely am able to look past, just because the songs that are here are absolute legendary classics. Whether they were made or not knowing they'd be carrying an entire 20-hour adventure, I'm not sure, but Koji Kondo proved he was up for the task regardless. After reviewing dozens of games on the show, I really think Super Mario 64 is the hardest game I've analyzed and reviewed. And why? I mean, every reviewer on the face of the planet has no qualms at all calling this the best game ever made. In fact, it's very rare that I see anyone criticize this game, or anyone who does, in fact, say, well, maybe this game wasn't as good as you remember, is usually met with an onslaught of, well, for the time, it was amazing. The reason I find it so hard to review is because what can I say about this game that hasn't already been said? And honestly, I have insecurity with this video that maybe I didn't say enough. Maybe I said too much. This game is an enigma in terms of video games that I don't think can be properly reviewed by a video essayist like me, but I sure tried. So the question is, can we truly hold Super Mario 64 accountable for its flaws? I sound like I'm holding this game in contempt of court or something like that. I mean, I guess we basically are. I guess we could, but I mean, how productive would that really be? It's not like Nintendo made Super Mario 64 and kept whatever flaws it had for the rest of the series' lifetime or anything like that. No, they just invented new flaws instead. Super Mario 64 at least acted in good faith. I can forgive almost everything except for the Bowser throws. I'm not gonna forgive that. What's funny too is I really feel like this game aging the way it did almost has me loving it all the more. Could you possibly even imagine Super Mario 64 without this blocky, stupid character model? I love it. This oversized Koopa the Quick, whatever abuse Bowser had to endure, it's all so goddamn stupid and clunky and bad looking, yet I love it. The things that would make any other game bad make Super Mario 64 legendary. I didn't even grow up with the N64 version of the game, and even I'm nostalgic for it. I mean, come on. I get that this is spiraling into another one of those, oh yes, Super Mario 64 is a masterpiece videos. So if you haven't gotten to it by now, there are reasons for that. The game is just really that good. They could have done things better, sure. But yeah, so could have you. I'm calling you out too. This is episode 50 of JeffCompass. We're halfway to 100. And so I feel like having a video where I speak positively about a game for a change and just embrace this warm feeling is as important as asking why ScribbleNuts died, or telling you why Pac-Man World Rally is bad. Because if we didn't have games like Super Mario 64, all of those videos, this entire show even, would mean absolutely nothing. So while I can't promise every video will be giving endless praise to your favorite game, today I'm throwing Super Mario 64 a well-deserved bone, because I want us to remember the reasons we love and cherish video games. Super Mario 64, for all intents and purposes, is a perfect video game.